Welcome to By George, an 80 Players podcast here at the George Theater. I am your host and marketing associate, Miranda Zapes, and today I have with me
Jeremiah Gamble, hello, from St. Paul, Minnesota, and I'm a playwright and poet, actor, all-around creative noodler, father of three, and just delighted to be down here. My play Kingdom Undone is being produced, and it's a thrill to be here.
We are so lucky to have you, and I'm so happy that you're here today with me.
Thanks for having me.
So we're going to get into all things Kingdom Undone. We're going to get into all things Jeremiah Gamble. I want to hear about your story and what brought you into theater and how Kingdom Undone came to be and how it's coming to life here at the George Theater.
Great.
I do want to let everybody know, I'm sure you've already noticed that we are in a different space because we don't have our photo booth quite ready for Kingdom Undone. We have a really short gap in between Steel Magnolias and Kingdom. We are shooting in Kevin Dean's office, which we are so grateful that he let us borrow for today.
He's like, wait a minute. No one consulted
Wait a second.
me.
This is not, how did you get a key?
He just storms in here.
Exactly.
So if we have a visitor, it's Kevin.
Don't worry. So first, I want to hear about what got you into theater. I did a little research, and I've heard you say it again. You're a performer. You've written. You were an author for children's books and things like that, and were in an a cappella group at one point.
It's my
I want
greatest
to
triumph.
hear the whole story that brought us to this point.
Okay. So my mom and dad and my uncle Steve, my mom Renee, my dad Gary, and my uncle Steve were a traveling Christian folk group called the Gamble Folk back in the late 60s and early 70s. And that was when folk music was like political music. So like Christian folk was like, wait a minute, we can do this. They traveled around, and me and my older sisters would go with them. I was very young. And we didn't go to church because we were always on the road at other people's churches. And we lived out in the country, and my faith formation really was music and stories. Like when I'd be sitting in the pew and they'd be doing the music and stuff, oftentimes I'd just crack open a Bible and just start reading the stories. And there was something about the music and the stories that really captured my imagination. And I didn't get it all. I still don't. But they captured my imagination. And I remember starting to go to actual Sunday school, like in 5th grade. Where they started to tell Bible stories in the class. And I'm like, oh yeah, I remember this story, but that's not how I remember it. And whereas like the way it was being told didn't capture my imagination the way the story did.
Yeah.
And so I noticed like this dissonance between what I thought was in the stories and how the stories were being told pretty early on. And then as I grew up, I was very much into music, which makes sense. I mean, that was the family I was in. But then my older sisters started getting into theater, and there was something about that art form that really interested me. And if you're a guy who can sing in high school, they will find you, the theater department, and they'll be like, hey, you can sing, you should be in our show, which is fair. And so they got me. And I'm like, okay, I'll be in this. And so that was delightful. And then I was on my way to college. I was very much like, I don't know, I like music. And I'm a pretty driven person now, but then I wasn't. I was just like, I don't know, what do I like, you know? And so I went as a music education major, but I got involved in theater right away and really fell in love with the theater department. It was a very small theater department. This is Bethel University in St. Paul, Minnesota. They were known for their music department at the time, but I really felt like the art was happening in the theater department. And there was the head of the department, Jeff Miller, who directed many of the plays and musicals, just really awakened my imagination and inspired me. And really it's his fault I do theater to this day. So thanks, Jeff. He knows this. And so I really fell in love with theater, and I found theater to be this like, oh, these stories that I love so much, they can be told. Like, here's this the good gift of these stories, and here's the good gift of this art form.
Yeah.
And think of that of like, the Bible is a story about this incarnational God, and then you have this art form which is incarnational, and like what a beautiful wedding that is of those two things. So in fulfillment for my theater degree, I wrote a one-man play called The Rough and the Holy, which is characters, people who encountered Christ in the Gospels. So it's 13 different characters from John the Baptist, and kind of through a chronology of then Jesus's resurrection.
Yeah.
But we don't see Jesus, because the way I wanted to do it was oftentimes, I mean, the way we experience Jesus is through the transformed lives of others. That's how we experience Jesus. And so I wanted these firsthand accounts of people in the Bible whose lives were changed when they encountered Jesus. And so I started taking that to churches and, working at a restaurant,
Yeah.
I had to
As you do.
pay the bills
Yeah.
and do the daily grind. So yeah, I just wanted to do my own thing. Like I really felt passionate about the stories and the art form, and then I just wanted to get out there. And so I did. And my wife and I, we met in college at Bethel. And she was also a music education major, which, by the way, I did drop that major and went to a theater music double major. I took like a couple education classes and I'm like, this is not it for me.
Yeah.
So thank you all you educators who stuck with it. So yeah, my wife and I met in college. We were in the musical Working together freshman year. We sang a duet together. And out of college, I was doing my one-man play, and she was doing productions with professional companies in the Twin Cities. So it's like, okay, this is how our artistic lives are going to go. And we got married, and this Bible camp, which had me perform my one-man show for their Christmas event, said, hey, we'd love to have you back. Do you have another show? And I was like, I just have the one show. They're like, well, it's a Christmas event. Do you want to write one? And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, well, I mean, yeah, basically a good business move.
Yeah,
like to
of
have,
course,
okay,
yeah.
a one-man show and then a Christmas show. I knew enough like gigging musicians and stuff. It's like Christmas is,
Oh,
you
yeah.
have to have a Christmas something.
That's the time.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, that's not a bad idea. So I'm like, sure, I'll write one. Well, Vanessa and I got married in October of that year. Then honeymoon, then moved into a new apartment, and life moved on in November. And then it was 2 weeks before the Christmas show, and I hadn't written it yet. Also, don't do that. I mean, do write it, but don't wait that long.
That long, yeah.
And so I was starting to write it, and I was just thinking, oh, I'd love to like revisit the Luke 2 account where we meet the characters at the manger. And the title I had for it and what it's called is called A Misfit Christmas.
Okay.
And the first character I thought of that I wanted to hear from was a cow, the cow at the manger.
Fascinating.
And so I just this is my creative process, folks.
That's okay.
I just stood in front of a mirror chewing cud, imaginary cud. I didn't have any available to me, and just started, this monologue about this cow, from this cow's perspective. And I was like, oh, and then what I'd love is to have a rebuttal from the innkeeper. I was like, okay, now that we've heard from the cow, I'd like to, give people a fair shake here. But then what I wanted was for the cow to just sit there chewing cud the entire time.
Yeah.
The innkeeper is giving their rebuttal. But I was like, well, I can't do that as a one-man show, So I'm like, hey, honey. I'm going to Iowa in 2 weeks to do this thing. I'm like, do you want to be in it? She's like, oh, when is it? And whatever. And she's like, yeah, sure, I'll be in it. So that was like the real humble beginnings of our full-time theater ministry. Like we wrote the show, like we're still memorizing it on the way down. Don't recommend that. This is just a big cautionary tale.
Yeah.
And we did it, and it was like it's a short piece, but standing ovation. The energy in the room was just such a confirmation. It was such a gift to us. And maybe it should have seemed obvious to us that this was the trajectory we were heading of like, well, of course you two are going to do something together, but we just didn't know.
Yeah.
So yeah, in 2000, we wrote a musical then on the life and songs of King David, a 2-person musical. And we've been full time, and our ministry is called Theater for the Thirsty. We travel around to all over and perform original plays and musicals based on Bible stories. So we do the life and Psalms of King David. We do the story of Esther as a musical comedy. We do the story of Daniel as a musical comedy, because the Old Testament is chock full of musical comedy.
Yeah, exactly.
Then we do a Misfit Christmas. And then I have my one-man show, The Rough and the Holy. And then our newest piece that we have written together, my wife and I write these together. I write the book and the lyrics, and then she writes the music. So those are the touring shows that we do. Now I haven't even touched Kingdom Undone yet.
No, I know. But just to hear the story getting here, it's just,
Sure.
I love hearing people's stories because especially hindsight's 2020. And so you can always pinpoint those little moments of like, we didn't know where we were going, but obviously because this one thing happened, of course we were going to go down this direction.
Yeah.
And I love seeing that all come together. And I think it tells a bigger story of like, yeah, God has a plan for all of us, and nothing happens without a reason.
Yeah.
And so it's just, I find it very fascinating to hear other people's stories.
Yeah, it's so much of just putting one foot in front of the other, like music education major.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's where I'm heading. And then nope. And then,
Yeah.
So you just, it's like on a hike or something. You don't necessarily end up where you think you're going. Like you go, oh, look at that trail, look at
Yeah.
that thing. And if you're paying attention, you notice other gifts available to you. And so that's definitely been my journey. In terms of Kingdom Undone, that was definitely a curveball. We had just premiered our traveling musical, My Name is Daniel, about the book of Daniel, and that was our biggest cast, a cast of 3.
Whoa.
So,
big jump here.
yeah,
big jumps
big jump.
about a
So, cast of 3, and that was with Theater for the Thirsty, our traveling theater ministry, and it was really successful. And we had a lot of bookings, and then a church in the Twin Cities that had a long history of producing a very large passion play approached me to write their next passion play. They said, would you consider it? And I was like, oh, interesting. Like I'd never written for someone else. It was a big budget, which I was like, I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
Huge cast, live animals, the whole shebang, And very early on, I'm like, this sounds fascinating. Like, this could be really cool. Also, I think the way I tell stories and the way you guys tell stories is very different. So it seems improbable that this will bridge and that will find the overlap, which is fine.
Yeah.
Like, and that is what it is. But just putting that out there right now, this seems improbable, but wouldn't it be cool if something came of this? So kind of in this whole, like, a journey starts by, like, I'm going that way, and there's an impulse, and it probably, well, hopefully is a good impulse to go, hey, I'm going to go that way. So that was that. Like, I'm just, okay, they asked, and I'm like, oh, let's go down this road.
Let's see, yeah.
Yeah, so we met for a year and a half. They're going through some leadership changes, but we met for a year and a half. And initially, and I said, like, well, first of all, I just need to find out, is there a story I need to tell or I want to tell? Because first of all, as a bit, like, that was what I did, was retell Bible stories through theater. So I'm like, well, this is the central story. This is the center of the center of the center. And I haven't told this story yet. And I'd been doing that now for over 15 years, writing, retelling biblical stories through theater. So I'm like, okay, maybe this is time to really challenge myself and dive into this story. But I was also like, I can't just punch in and punch out for this. Like, okay, I'll write you a script and then God bless you. And I'm like, I care too much about this story and about this craft. So I'm going to have to see if there's a story here. And so I was doing research and sitting down and doing my writerly thing of just locking myself away and trying to figure out what I felt, what I thought about this story, and to see if a story was starting to form. And it became very evident, yes, like, not just do I want to, but like, I feel like I have to. Like, I feel like this is something I'm really compelled to do. So after meeting for a year and a half, and by that time I had kind of a rough draft cobbled together, or more of an outline with some flesh on the bones a little bit, and they said, yes, we're going to do it, we're going to move forward. And I remember my wife and I toasting and at home, and we're like, this is amazing, this is exciting. Then there was a few changes, and then a couple weeks later they're like, we're not moving forward.
Oh no.
And honestly, it was like more of a relief than it was anything else, because it kind of came back to, I think we all felt this was always true and always the way it was going to be. It's kind of like this side of heaven, some things are just going to be really hard to make happen.
I see. Okay.
So it wasn't anyone like it. Well,
No,
there wasn't a
course.
falling out. It was more just like this season where we're in, and how, because I really felt like a lot of times the way these larger passion plays, it's narration and then big musical numbers. Sometimes just like worship music. And then a lot of volunteers, and there's a lot of spectacle. But in terms of the craft of storytelling, theatrical storytelling, it's very much limited to narration and then these big musical numbers that aren't musical theater. It's more just music.
Yeah.
So it's certainly an emotional experience, and there's some telling of a story, but it's not like a dramatic narrative. And so that's what I wanted to do. And so I was like, for that, I feel like it's important that we have actors and professional actors. And then if there's a core professional actors, and then the volunteers are the larger, ensemble members and stuff. So So anyway, I came back from the meeting, and my wife Vanessa met me in the backyard, and she's like, "Well," and I'm like, "Well, it's not happening." And she's like, "Oh," she's like, "Well, I feel like we still need to do this." And I was like, "I know, so do I." She's like, "But what do we do?" And I'm like, "I don't know." And she's like, "How much do you think it's going to cost?" And I said, $80,000.
Yeah.
And she just she just burst into tears.
No.
And so did I. And I was just like, but I feel like we need to do this.
Most definitely.
And there's something about the fact that, like, yes, we like stepped away from this budget and all this kind of stuff, but it was like she and I, it's like we've done not this, but together we've managed our way forward. So even just like we have each other, we feel like God is behind this as much as anyone can ever feel like. And so we just started to put one foot in front of the other. We got fiscally sponsored, which means you can function as a 501c3 without becoming a 501c3.
Okay.
So there's a great organization in St. Paul called Springboard for the Arts. They became our fiscal sponsor. So we started fundraising for a year and a half, and we raised $55,000 over a year and a half while I was writing and researching. I worked on that piece writing for 3 years, almost gave it up because at first we thought it was like the Great American Musical, and this is going to be a musical theater piece. And so, which means all the most important dramatic moments are sung. And we rewrote 9 songs, and then we workshopped them. There's a company called Nautilus Music Theater in St. Paul, and they do this series called Rough Cuts. And so we workshopped these 9 songs, performed them for an audience, and I hated my songs.
Oh my goodness.
Our songs. I was just like, this is brutal.
Yeah.
We worked so hard on them. But it was like, this is not what this is.
Yeah.
And so, but then our director, Jeff Miller, so if you recall, he was our theater professor who inspired me.
Story,
inspired me to be in theater, and Vanessa too. We chose him as our director for Kingdom Undone.
Yeah.
And so we were slated to do a workshop. This was after we scrapped the songs. We were slated to do a workshop like a following spring. That was in the following spring. And I was like, if you're going to do a workshop, you have to have an intent, a purpose for the workshop. Otherwise, we're all just like, what are we doing?
Hanging around,
yeah. Which meant, like, what is the rewrite? And so it was the rewrite I decided was, and I really was like, I just don't know. I don't know if I have the energy for this. I don't know creatively. I don't know. I don't have a way forward. It's a huge show. Like, even at that time, I think the cast was like 24.
My goodness.
Which... don't recommend that.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
A story of don'ts.
Yeah, exactly. So I decided, okay, the rewrite is going to be throw away the songs, which those were already in the can, the garbage, I mean.
Yeah.
And then try to rewrite it to get the smallest cast possible. First of all, it's a passion play. So I decided very early on, okay, we're not going to have 12 dudes standing on stage.
Yeah.
I mean, that if that's the way you want to tell the story, that's fair. And it's been done. I'm just like, that's just a lot of dudes standing on stage.
Yeah.
So I rewrote it, we workshopped it, and that was really the piece that is the heart and very much mostly of what is going to be produced here. So our company, Bucket Brigade, so Theater for the Thirsty is our traveling theater ministry. Bucket Brigade is our company that we created to produce Kingdom Undone.
Yeah.
To be able to raise funds.
Oh my goodness.
So we produced that in 2012 at the Southern Theater in Minneapolis, a cast of 16, 5 musicians in addition. Big old budget. We picked our like dream team of designers, and it was the hardest I've ever worked on anything. And hopefully ever will.
This is it. This is
I'm going to revisit this podcast and then listen to my words.
Yeah.
Oh, I did say that. I should stick to that promise. And wow, it was so rich. It was such fertile soil. The fruit of it was just so beautiful. Many people in the cast, at least half the cast, aren't believers as we understand the term to be. But it was such a rich experience to engage this story and to engage it as art. Like this is a story, and we worked hard to have the craft of theater, and where any theater artist would look at it and go, that's really good writing. And this is a really good story. And I haven't seen it this way. I haven't heard it this way. And that was important to us because for me, if I care that much about the story, then I care that much that the story is received, and how like stories are just gifts. They just are. And so if you give something as a gift, like, those gift givers that like when you receive a gift from them, it's like you feel seen. And there's something about the gift, like the beauty of it, the intentionality of it, the craft of it. You're like, wow, you made this? That's beautiful. And that matters. Like, we're wired that way. Like, we are aesthetic creatures. God made us this way. Like, when we eat, like, yes, we eat for function, but there's more. There's taste. There's a whole experience we're having. So I think of this story in this way. We could just think of this as take your medicine or get your nutrients. But what a missed opportunity.
Yeah.
Like, God made us. He didn't just give us the gift of these stories. He gave us the gift of story and storytelling, and that there's a delight in that. So I really wanted to engage the audience with a really good story. And that meant stakes. And that meant that we don't necessarily know where this is going, and that the characters, that there's an actual problem, and the characters have a desire, like an objective and a super objective.
Needs and wants.
Needs and wants and tactics. And the resolution is, or the conflict is, then do they get it or do they not? And then the resolution is then the aftermath of that. And so to ask those dramatic questions with the passion story feels a little bit like, is this okay? Like, is anybody going to go, knock on the door and you're like, you can't be doing this. We're going to revoke your storytelling license.
You can't create anymore.
But it's like, what are these stories for? Like, to tell, right? Are we, like, can we tell them? And as believing artists who care about the craft and care about the stories, can we tell them? Like, permission to tell? And that means we're going to take some artistic license prayerfully and like hopefully with the guiding of the Spirit and doing our research. But this isn't a sermon. This isn't a lecture. This is a story. And when we tell stories and receive stories, man, something happens. Like, something just happens. And so that happened for me in the research and the telling of the story of, I haven't seen this before. Not in like, whoa, wait till they see this, but like, I was moved. I just saw aspects of the story, aspects of Jesus, aspects of the disciples, aspect of the women disciples that I hadn't seen before. And it felt rich and it felt energizing and life-giving. And so, so Kingdom Undone was premiered in 2012. It was funny, this was the first week of rehearsal here, and my Facebook memories feed popped up from 12 years ago. And it's like, first week of Kingdom Undone rehearsals, like 12 years ago this week. So, so pretty cool.
It's amazing how that works.
Yeah. So we did a 3-week run. We survived. So we did it again. We produced the show again. We brought it back in 2013. Then we took a break. And then we produced it again in 2016. But it's been sitting there. I hadn't heard the story from Jamie McGann that he was at our production of Kingdom Undone in 2012. And I hadn't heard the story that when he left the theater that he said, I'm going to produce that play someday. So that's pretty cool. And thanks, Jamie, for keeping that promise.
12 years later.
Here we are.
Yeah.
So just to be here, I never get to be just the playwright in the room. Like, I'm always wearing many hats, literally and figuratively. So the joy of to be the playwright, just to be gathered in a room of artists, such talented, big-hearted artists, and to hear people's responses to the script and to the story, and see Jamie manning the helm, and it's such a gift. It's such a gift. So I'm just on cloud 9. And those moments where you're just like, soak it all in, be present. Like, how can I just like soak it all in? Just be the sponge, the sponge. And so I'm having those moments where are like, where you just feel full in that regard, which is so great. So that's it.
And done. Cut.
So come to the show.
Yeah, exactly. No, that is phenomenal to hear. And again, just the little pieces. Jamie McGann was there in 2012.
Yeah.
And the time that it took you, it was originally going to be produced, a year before or 2 years
Or maybe never. Yeah.
Or maybe, yeah. But
Yeah.
just everything that happened and all the no's that came along the way,
Yeah.
I think that's something that you keep touching on, that even when one door closes, I mean, it's a cliche, another door opens, but it's to not stop at those moments and to you guys sitting in the backyard and deciding, no, but this is something that we really need to tell, that we feel called to tell. And so we're going to, against all odds, produce it.
Yeah. And like the open door analogy, like sometimes the door is like the hand, like it's unlocked. You know, like we had to like open it and step through and go, you know, if this fails, like we're gonna have to take out a second mortgage. You know, so that was a big risk there.
Yeah.
But yeah, sometimes that open door just literally means it looks shut. Try the handle.
You know? Oh, that's beautiful. I love that. Yeah, of course.
And it might be stuck.
Yeah,
like,
and you got to shove it a little bit. You got to.
Oh, you might have to like. Is there someone on the other side?
Yeah.
You might have to jimmy it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
My goodness.
That's true. But even with this show, like it was a cast of 16, and that was even like. Because there's like temple guards and Roman centurions. There was times where we're like, we need 2 temple guards right now. Raise your hand if you're not doing something and you can be a temple guard.
Yeah.
And it's very theatrical, so it's quick changes and it's just all hands on deck. We're all making and telling the story. We're all storytellers.
Of course.
We inhabit characters, but we're all storytellers. And Jamie's like, okay, I'd love to produce this, but can you do it with 13? And I was like, let me check. Because already I had been like,
this is the smallest it can be.
Yeah. But in the back of my mind, I'm like, maybe it could be smaller. Maybe it could be smaller. So I revisited the show. And while I was open to it, I was like, only if I can uphold the narrative.
Of course.
And so there was already some double casting. So now there's triple casting. And also some transitions where I'm like, I think this will work. God be with you.
Yeah. Most definitely.
So far so good.
Yeah. We're only in the first week rehearsal.
Right. I know. So that's exciting. And man, like I gotta say, like there's some, like as an actor, some delicious tracks, because the actor who plays James, the disciple, who's just an absolute goofball. Like the character is. Also plays Caiaphas, you know, the high priest. So talk about a delicious, like, complete 180
Most
in terms
definitely.
of characters.
Yes.
So to be able to sink your teeth into that is pretty great. And the actor playing James and Caiaphas is certainly enjoying the sandbox, because it's really fun to see them play and discover. So that's fun. That's fun because there are some delicious characters, and it's fun to see the characters and the actors inhabiting them already. So.
Yeah.
The other aspect is the music. So remember when I threw all those songs away?
Yeah.
After I wrote the book, the play, and said, I think this is it. Then music started coming back. Not that music.
Yeah.
Oh, you guys are done.
That's okay. We'll put that one to rest.
But it came in as very organic, more cinematic in how it becomes this emotional layer, this emotional bed at times. But then also there is sung music, but why it's a play with music is these are times when these people would be singing, times of celebration, times of prayer, times of lament. And that really became beautiful. It really was organic in the way it came back to the piece. And the music is really an important part of the piece. So that was a gift, because that other gift, the other music I toiled so hard on, and it just didn't pay off. But here's the thing, like that work isn't wasted. Like there's something about that experience, and you work on something and go, well, that's not it. Like even if you like completely screw up your first batch of chili, like you're going to learn something from that. And then your next batch is going to be better. So, and so the music like found its way back in, and it really is an important part of the story. I think there's something about it that gives a sense of place and a timelessness as well. So we very much use like just kind of like some Middle Eastern modal type sounds and instrumentation. And so, it's really, really beautiful. And so I'm excited for people to hear and experience the music of the show.
Yeah. I want to bring it back real quick to the comedy aspect of it, because I think a lot of people, at least before I read the script, I didn't know. I mean, the line that we were telling and we were marketing it as was the passion play told through the eyes of the betrayer.
Yeah.
And so I didn't realize reading it how comedic it was going to be.
Get prepared to laugh.
Exactly. I mean, and that's kind of the thing, is like, we all know what's going to happen.
Sure.
And I think it's such a perfect, like, I love when you take stories, you take experiences, and you put a different perspective on them.
Yeah.
And you figure out, you find the needs and the wants of a person that has never gotten their story told before. And it makes complete sense, because of course, and you talked about it at the rehearsal that I went to, that Judas, it just didn't make any sense that he would give up
for
Jesus,
30 pieces of silver, which was the price of a common slave. So if he was really looking for money, he could have easily extorted for way more, way more. So that just doesn't hold up. Yes, I believe he was paid that, but that's not like what was at the heart of it for me.
Of course.
So I've always had that dramatic question of like, what? That doesn't quite hold up for me.
And
there must be more going on.
That you were asking those questions and that the story came out of it. But I want to know, I mean, you talk about it being hard to kind of to tell this story again, and being a believer and worried about stepping on toes or doing it injustice. Could you tell me a bit about the process of bringing in like the comedic and the musical elements to it?
Yeah. Well, first of all, comedy it's just the way I'm wired. It's how this machine works. So my antennae are just like dee, like find the ridiculous, find the funny. And honestly, like as I'm reading the Bible, like it's like I feel like God's telling me jokes, and God's like, I mean, that's pretty funny, isn't it? And I'm like, yeah, it is funny. And so I don't know. I delight in humor. I feel like it's such a gift. And I love character-based humor. Character-based humor is rooted in, this is just who this person is. They're not telling a joke. You know, I'm not going to be jokey. I mean, we all know, like, the story of these disciples. I mean, my gosh, they're so deliciously human. They're so flawed.
Yeah.
And at times, like, it seems just blockheaded of, like, how could you miss this? And yet, isn't that how we, you know, how could we have missed it? It was right in front of us.
Yeah.
So there's a scene, where they're looking for the donkey. And that was the first scene that I wrote. Yeah. And it came fully formed.
Of course.
Like, it just came, there it was. Like, there's times where you, like, get the seed of an idea of a scene, and then you kind of, like, piece together slowly but surely. That was just like, there it is. And that did help set the tone for the piece. Because I'm like, this is who these disciples are.
Yeah.
Like, how are we supposed to find this donkey? Like, and what sort of, and even like the life of faith, like how much information do we really feel like we have in a relationship with God? We're like, oh yeah, we've downloaded the instructive for the day. This is what we're supposed to do. This. Mostly it's like, I think, I should, you know? Yeah. And so I found some of these instructions from Jesus to be deliciously cryptic. Yeah. Where it's just like, so if I was a disciple going, okay, we're supposed to find a guy and he has a donkey, like, and all the questions that could be like from the little group of like, but what if, and well, did he really mean, and all that kind of stuff. And we do that. We do that about Jesus's words about other things, like, and like really important matters. So, and even the people who are literally there to hear his direct words, or did this because it's also fair of like, this guy and a donkey, like, and so, there's just, it's something about like, if you let people be people, like on stage. Yeah. I can't remember the quote, but it's like, you know, theater's like life with all the dull bits cut out kind of a thing. Yeah. And so if you let people's inherent natures rise and let those colors shine and stuff like that, then you will find humor and conflict. Both of those things will happen. And sometimes I feel like, at least this has been my experience, that we don't give that permission to characters in the Bible. Most when we represent them. Yes. We're careful with them, and that can yield a certain result. But I feel like there's missed opportunities if we work and do the hard work of artfully crafting a story. There's gifts to be had there. And because that's how God wired us, to experience story. Yeah. And experience this good news as an experience and as a story, and not just some things you really need to know. And so that's been fun to see the actors delight in that and enjoy it. And there's also moments where it's just like, one of my favorite things too as a theater storyteller is super serious, funny.
Yeah.
Like boom, boom. Or funny, 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 boom. The air goes out of the room.
Yeah.
Like those 1-2 punches to me are such a delightful thing to experience as an audience member. So as a theater maker, like when those happen naturally, I'm like, oh yes, that sudden shift. And there's something about that shift that we react so wonderfully to. It's almost like the cold plunge after a hot sauna. Like that's good for us.
It
and
is.
so I feel like there's something about
Makes you
that
feel
experience.
alive.
Yeah. I hadn't thought of that before. Like I think that's true about those moments. It's like going from a hot sauna to a cold plunge or vice versa,
Exactly.
which I do recommend.
We got one.
Yeah. Right. Yes.
I think it's just beautiful, and I have to commend you for your storytelling, you and your wife, because it's just a wonderful story. And just seeing the rehearsals and them doing a table read, the story already comes to life so well. And that's your writing, that's their acting, and I can't wait to see it come up on stage. I grew up in a Catholic house, and so the Passion Play, the Signs of the Cross that we would do, I mean, it was never told with humor. It was very serious. It was, this is it, and this is how it's going to be every single year. And so me reading it and getting to see it come to life, it's just new, and it makes me happy to see it, that it is a very serious story, and it's a wonderful story, and it's redemption, and it's love, and it's joy. But to see it from a different perspective, it breathes so much life into it.
Well, and I think like because there's humor in it, I feel like that takes the story more seriously. It's like life. What if even our hardest moments in life, remove any possibility for laughter from that moment? How would we survive?
Yeah.
Like we'd end up like if we go to a celebration of life service, like to remember someone, so often it's like the funny stories that people tell, and seeing Uncle Gary be himself at the celebration of life service and how he's remembering the person you've lost and that you shared. Like if we removed humor from those circumstances, we would be lost.
Yeah.
And so to me, it's like that's not making fun of the source material.
No.
That is absolutely inviting the fullness of the human experience into this story.
Most definitely.
And we don't have to, God isn't asking us to be careful, like in this regard of like we are storytelling. And so I think that matters. And I think people will, because of that experience, people will have such a richer and fuller experience. Yes, it is the passion story through the eyes of the betrayer, but also it's all of these people's stories. Like Mary, the mother, coming to life, and Magdalena and James and John and Judas and Jesus, where you just see them differently, and you can bring the things, and you will. You'll bring the things that are near and dear to you, but because you already hold those things near and dear, this is gonna help you see it in a new light and appreciate things on a deeper level, and a new level. And so I'm really excited about audiences being able to experience it.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think that's such a good perspective as well that I was trying to get at, but it's a more human experience. It's more realistic. You can see yourself in these characters now, and they are us and we are them. And it's one big story.
Yeah.
I do have I know we're getting close to out of time, but at the end of each episode, I like to do a little lightning round questions where I kind of ask everybody the same questions.
All right.
So my first question I'm going to ask you, I'm so glad to hear that you were a performer at one point, or still a performer, but I want to know what your biggest mishap on stage was.
This was kind of so it was a new play on the Sorcerer's Apprentice.
Okay.
I was playing Pod, who's the Sorcerer's Apprentice, this young guy. It was me and two older actors. This was not a play I produced. This was another company.
Okay.
And there's a bunch of magic tricks that were happening, but we only got to seriously like half of the magic tricks. Like, so the stage space was not safe. There was a moment where the wizard turned me into a gorilla. So I literally walked out in a gorilla suit, just like, walking out in a gorilla suit. There's smoke around me.
Yeah.
I'm standing there. And then I just hear, "Stop the show! Stop the show!" And I'm saying, I can see like nothing. Like I'm in this gorilla suit. I see a shadow out of the corner of my eye. It's the director with a headset on, and I look down into my periphery and see a flaming gunny sack next to me. It's literally next to me. There's this bag of books, old books, because that's what Pod was stealing the magic books. I was stealing the magic books. Mm-hmm. Flaming, in flames, right next to my gorilla body.
No!
And he picked it up, ran off, and I'm just standing there. Fire alarms go off, sprinklers go off. This was a venue where there was a wedding going on upstairs. There was this beautiful place called Landmark Center. The whole building cleared.
Yeah.
So that wasn't on me, but it was, wow. That was a memorable stage moment.
Most definitely.
So whatever that is, don't do that.
I just want to imagine you now, everybody standing outside, you in a gorilla suit, and the bride and the groom, like, what is going on?
Just standing outside in the gorilla suit, just still smoking.
Smoking, exactly.
Yeah.
Wonder what happened there.
Yeah, I'm sure you haven't gotten that answer before.
No, but it's wonderful.
It really
I
is.
love. So we're doing Kingdom Undone. We're coming up to our Easter season.
Yeah.
So I want to know, what is something that you look forward to every Easter season? Do you have a family tradition or something that you guys do?
Boy, I just love Easter. I love spring. Mm-hmm. And so, like, to me, like, I see Easter in spring. Mm-hmm. Like, that's what I see. Like, shoots like pushing up out of the ground, and especially in Minnesota where we're like, are we gonna make it this winter, you know? And so it's such good news. Like, I see Easter all around me. I see resurrection all around me during Easter. And I also feel like after winter, I need resurrection. I need the idea of resurrection and how resurrection is literally all around us in things that are growing again, and people who are having a fresh start. And so to me, it is like the biggest gift for me is just the idea of resurrection inserts itself into my everyday life around Easter, and that's such a gift, and I can feel that. Like, I can feel how that shifts my perspective in so many things. So that's kind of how it goes for me.
That's amazing. We don't get spring in Houston. I'm glad that you experience full seasons. We experience hot and more hot.
Mm-hmm. Yes, boy howdy.
So my final question, we've been talking about Kingdom Undone the entire time. If you could sum it up in a minute or less, why should people come see Kingdom Undone?
That's a great question. I think this is an important story regardless of, in our culture, in our American Western culture, this is an important story. Mm-hmm. And regardless of whether you grew up in this faith tradition, it's an important story. And I think it has good gifts for us. I think this is a really good story, well told. Mm-hmm. We worked really hard to craft a story that is engaging. There are stakes. There is humor. Mm-hmm. There's humanity. And sometimes I feel like, we can distance ourselves from this story and then and revisit in certain contexts. But envision an invitation to engage the story. This beautiful story as story is such a rich experience. And to have these talented actors and such gifted artists tell such a good story in such a good way, it's like going to a restaurant where everything about it, the service, the atmosphere, the food, everything. You're just going to be like, this was an amazing experience. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's what this is. Yes. Like, it's just, the table is set.
Most
definitely. Come and eat.
Completely agree. I can't wait to see it get on stage and just come even more to life.
Yeah. Thank you.
No, thank you so much for writing the play, and thank you for being on this episode of By George. I wish we could sit here and talk for hours on end.
As you could tell, I probably could.
I still have so many questions, but we'll save them. Maybe we'll do a follow-up episode at some point.
Sounds good.
But thank you so much for being on this episode.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of By George. Please come in and see Kingdom Undone. It is showing through March 13th through the 30th. And we are not currently in our photo booth in the lobby, but make sure when you come in to get your Easter photos taken. Thank you guys so much for listening again. Thank you, Jeremiah, for being here, and we will see you guys next time. Bye. This has been By George, an 80 Players at the George Theater podcast, hosted and produced by Miranda Zapes. Listen anywhere you listen to podcasts and follow us on Instagram at By George Theater. That's THEATRE. Sure to like, share, and subscribe. And By George, we'll see y'all next time.
generally the gestation for one of our new pieces is like a year. So I write a piece in like 3 or 4 months, then we stage it, and then, which I don't recommend that. It's not very long.
Yeah.
It's hard on the engine. Kingdom Undone was a longer time.